I don't usually go looking for antlers when somebody calls me spooked. Most shed hunters are practical people. They're out there counting steps, reading wind, checking bedding areas, and keeping their eyes on the ground. They don't waste breath on ghost stories. That's why I'm recording this one. Because the message I got didn't sound like a guy trying to hype himself up. It sounded like someone trying to convince his own brain that what he saw had to have a normal explanation. A voicemail came in around late afternoon, one of those half-delivered notifications that shows up when service flickers. I was at the cabin, cleaning up after lunch, doing the boring stuff that makes a day feel real. Laundry, boots by the door, Emma's little mittens on the radiator like tiny surrendered flags. Lauren watched me listen to it twice without moving.
You look like you just got told the roof's on fire.
I'm fine. It's probably nothing.
That's what you say right before it turns into something.
I didn't answer her right away. I just hit play again and held the phone closer, like volume was going to turn nonsense into sense.
Evan, I'm sorry. I know we don't really know each other. We traded messages that one time about the old spur road past Miller's Cut. I'm the guy that found that set last year by the beaver pond. I'm not calling to ask permission or anything. I'm calling because I found something that doesn't fit. It's a ring. Antlers. Not just one or two. A whole ring like somebody laid them down on purpose. Tight. Like a fence you could step over. And there's blood. There's fresh blood on old bone. Not on the snow like a spill. On the bone, like it was painted on. I know what you're thinking. Predator kill, drag, coyotes, whatever. I thought that too. But it's the season. It's late winter. Those antlers aren't supposed to be here like that. And the bone, man, the bone is old. Sun-bleached, chewed, cracked. Then there's flesh wedged in the gnaw marks, not dried, not frozen, like it was pressed in minutes ago. That's the part I can't make sit right. I'm sending you a pin, but my service is trash. If it doesn't go through, it's off logging road 12. Take the split toward the meadow, the one with the lone lightning-struck pine. It's not far in. I'm not going back alone. I'm not going back at all. If you want to see it, go now before snow covers it. And listen, I walked around it and my camera wouldn't focus on the middle. I'm not saying there's a monster sleeping there. I'm saying the middle looks wrong, like it's not there the way it should be, like my eyes slide off it. Call me back if this goes through, or don't. Just don't let it sit out there like that.
The message ended with wind noise and a click, like he'd hung up too hard. I stared at the phone and felt that familiar little itch in the back of my head. The one that shows up when someone hands me a problem shaped like a trap.
Don't.
I didn't even have to ask what she meant.
It's late. There's snow. It's an hour out, and you won't have service when you need it.
I'll just take a look. Photos, in and out. I'll be back before full dark.
You always think dark is a light switch. It's not. It's a tide.
I told her I'd keep my head on. I told her I'd stay on the roads. I told her I'd turn around if anything felt off. She didn't argue after that. That was worse. She just watched me put on my jacket and pack a headlamp like she already knew arguing wouldn't be the thing that kept me safe. The drive out was all familiar discomfort, logging roads that looked like they'd been scraped straight through the forest with a dull knife. Patches of snow on the shaded shoulders, bare dirt where sun hit, frost glittering in the ditch like spilled sugar. My phone bounced between one bar and nothing. The pin never came through, so I went by the directions from the voicemail. Road 12. The split. The meadow. The lightning-struck pine. Golden hour was doing that pretty lie it does, making everything look softer than it is. Pine trunks turned copper. The open cuts glowed. The sky went pale blue, clean and sharp like a piece of glass. I pulled over where the spur widened enough to turn around. I killed the engine and listened. No whine down low, just a faint whisper up in the needles. Somewhere far off, A single bird gave a dry call and then shut up, like it remembered it had business elsewhere. I checked the basics. Boots tight, knife in pocket, headlamp ready. Extra batteries, camera, tape roll, compass. Not because I wanted to play explorer, because getting lost out here is a dumb way to die, and I've never been sentimental about dumb deaths. Before I left the truck, I tried calling the number that left the voicemail. It rang once and dumped into nothing. No voicemail greeting, just a deadline, like the tower had taken a breath and decided not to exhale. I texted Lauren anyway, short and clear, the way I do when I don't want to give worry room to grow. Heading in now. No pin. Using directions. Back before dark. The message didn't send. It just sat there, with that little empty circle. Forever trying. The hike was easy at first. The snow came and went in patches. It was late winter. That in-between stretch where everything's half awake and half dead. The ground had that hard crust in shaded spots. And the sun it gave a little. Wet. And gritty. I found the split in the road by the way the ruts changed. One track looked used, fresher tire marks. The other looked older, with saplings growing up in the center. I took the older one. And then I saw the lightning-struck pine. It stood by itself at the edge of the open meadow like a warning sign. Half its bark was gone in a long scar, and the exposed wood had darkened like cooked meat. The top was broken off, jagged, reaching into the sky like a snapped bone. I stopped there. Not because I was afraid, but because the meadow felt too open. The forest behind me felt too close, and the quiet had thickened. I did what I always do when I don't trust my instincts. I made it about facts. I took a photo of the tree. I checked the compass. I looked at the sun and judged how much time I had. Then, I stepped into the meadow. The antler ring was visible from 10 yards out, which meant it wasn't hidden. It wasn't tucked under brush or buried in a drift. It was placed. At first glance, it looked like someone had dumped a pile and it had settled into a rough circle. But the closer I got, the worse that explanation fit. Every antler was angled inward, tips pointing toward the center, like a crown turned inside out. There were shed antlers, yes, but also chunks of older bone. A partial skull plate with toothless sockets. A section of rib. Something that might have been a scapula, cracked and gnawed. And on those old pale pieces, there were smears of fresh red. Not dried brown, not black. Red that still had shine. Red that looked wrong against sun-bleached bone, like someone had drawn on it. I crouched at the edge of the ring and felt the hairs on my arms lift under my sleeves. The air above it looked normal. It didn't smell like a kill. No sour, no rank. Just cold meadow air and pine resin. Then I noticed the snow inside the ring. It wasn't just disturbed. It was melted. A clean oval, maybe 3 feet long, smooth and dark where wet ground showed through. The edges were neat, like someone had cut it out. No scattered slush, no stomp marks. Just a warm-shaped absence, like something had been lying there long enough to soften it from underneath. My first thought was obvious. A bedding spot, an animal curled up. Deer do that, elk do that. Even coyotes will tuck in where wind breaks. My second thought followed right behind it. But not inside a ring of antlers. I took a step around the perimeter, careful not to touch anything. Then I lifted my camera and started photographing from multiple angles, wide shots first, then closer detail. The camera whirred, hunting focus. And it wouldn't lock on the center. It'd focus on the antler tips. It'd focus on the snow outside the ring. It'd focus on a blade of grass poking through a patch of melt. But every time the autofocus point drifted over the oval in the middle, it pulsed and gave up like it couldn't find depth. I turned off autofocus and tried manual. It still felt like my eyes were doing the same thing, like my attention slid off the center and snagged on the edges. That's the part that makes me angry when I think about it. I hate when a thing messes with basic perception. I can handle fear, I can handle bad luck, but I don't like reality getting soft around the seams. I took more photos anyway. Burst shots, close-ups of the bone with blood, close-ups of the antler's bases. I kept telling myself the blood could be recent, the bone could have been moved, the ring could have been made by a person. And then I saw the drag marks. Something had been moved. Recently. There were drag marks just outside the ring. 2 shallow grooves in the snow crust. Like something heavy had been pulled on its side. I followed them with my eyes first, then with my feet. The marks led away from the ring toward the tree line. Not straight, but deliberate. There were spots where the snow crust had been pressed down in a repeating pattern, like knees or elbows touching every few feet. I expected the trail to get messy near the trees. Branch scrape, leaf litter, broken twigs. But it didn't. It got cleaner. Then it stopped. No scatter, no ending, just nothing. I walked a slow circle, scanning for where it picked up again. And that's when I found the part that made my stomach drop just a notch. There were drag marks coming back too. Parallel to the first set, a little deeper, like the return trip carried more weight, leading back toward the ring, stopping just shy of it, as if whatever had been dragged didn't cross the boundary. They were practiced. I knelt and touched the edge of one groove with a gloved finger. The snow at the bottom was polished, slightly wet. Recent. I looked up at the trees and waited for a normal sound. A crow? A squirrel? Anything to break the tension. Nothing. So I did the reasonable thing. The thing that makes me feel like I'm in charge of my own route. I pulled out the bright tape from my pack and wrapped a strip around a pine trunk at the meadow edge. High enough to see, tight enough to stay. I made a little flag that'd catch light. I took a photo of it too, the tape and the lightning-struck pine in the background, so I'd have a visual anchor. Then I went 10 minutes into the tree line following the drag marks, moving slow, keeping the meadow behind me as my reference. 10 minutes of cold shadows and pine needles underfoot. 10 minutes of nothing happening, 10 minutes of my brain trying to settle. Then I turned around to head back. The tape was on the wrong tree. I don't mean it was hard to spot. I mean it was clearly not the same trunk. The tree I'd marked had a low scar where bark had peeled. It had a crooked branch that pointed like an arm. I'd noticed those things because I'm careful. The tape I saw now was wrapped at the same height, same tightness, same little flag, but on a different pine 3 steps to the left. Maybe I misremembered. Maybe I was rushed. Maybe every pine looks the same. Then I looked at the ground. My prints were there. A single set, mine, coming in. A single set, mine, turning around. They led to the tree I'd originally marked. And that tree had no tape. I walked up to it and put my hand on the trunk. The bark was cold and rough. My tape wasn't there. No torn bits, no adhesive residue, nothing. I turned to the wrong tree with the tape and felt a pressure behind my eyes, like the forest was leaning closer. I pulled the tape off and stuffed it in my pocket. I didn't want to leave anything out here that could be used like a handle. That thought came uninvited. Used like a handle, like something might be learning how I navigate. I marked the original tree again, this time making an X with tape, 2 strips crossing, obvious. I took another photo of it. Then, because I'm stubborn, I kept going deeper, tracing the drag mark's direction. A dry clack drifted through the trees. At first it sounded like branches ticking together. A gentle, hollow tap. Nothing dramatic. Then it repeated. 2 taps. A pause. 1 tap. Antlers. I know that sound. Bucks sparring in fall, testing. The brittle knock of bone against bone. This wasn't sparring. There was no grunt, no rush, no crash. It was measured, like someone tapping antlers together the way a person might tap a spoon on a glass. A signal. I stopped and listened, trying to locate it. It came from the tree line ahead, then shifted to my right, then back ahead again. It wasn't moving like an animal runs, more like it was being passed along. I lifted my camera and panned slowly, zooming in on gaps between trunks. The viewfinder showed ordinary forest. Pine, shadow, a little snow in hollows. But my body felt watched. I turned back toward the meadow, deciding that was enough. The evidence was collected, weirdness noted. It was time to leave. That's when my phone lit up in my pocket and started playing sound. Loud sound. A distress call. Not just any call. The sharp, needy bleat of a fawn, the kind that makes every predator within earshot lift its head. My phone was at max volume. I yanked it out so fast I almost dropped it. The screen was on, Deer Call app open, and the play button was pulsing like it had been tapped on purpose. I hadn't opened that app in months. My fingers fumbled. I stabbed at the stop button. Nothing. I hit the volume down. It fought me, bouncing back up like the phone was arguing. I finally hit the power button and forced the screen off, which killed the sound. Silence rushed in behind it like cold water. The clacking from the trees stopped too. For a beat, everything held still. Then, movement. It wasn't a deer or a person. It was something tall that shifted inside the line of trees without ever stepping fully into view. It kept itself in the trees, sliding from trunk to trunk so it never fully showed itself. Every time I tried to focus on it, it was already tucked back into the line of trees. It moved by sliding through the vertical lines, never breaking silhouette into a full body. Like it was always half hidden, except there was nothing actually hiding it. My camera found it before my eyes did. The autofocus snapped to the nearest trunk and stayed there, refusing to shift, like it didn't want to acknowledge anything between. I lowered the camera and looked directly. The movement was still there, but my brain kept trying to simplify it. Tree sway, branch shift, parallax. Except the air was still. The branches weren't moving. And whatever it was, it had joints. Not like a deer's smooth legs, like something that bent the wrong way and then corrected, as if it was learning how to imitate a walk. I backed up a step, slow and careful, keeping my shoulders squared to the trees. I didn't want to turn my back. I didn't want to run. As I backed up, my boot pressed into a shallow print. My own print. Except it wasn't mine. It matched my tread pattern. Same heel notch, same diagonal lines. Same stride length. But it was placed a few inches to the left of where my foot had actually been. I stared down and saw the pattern continue behind me. 2 sets now. One mine, one an imitation. Always a few inches off, always just wrong enough to notice if you looked, and just right enough to fool you if you didn't. That's when I stopped pretending this was a cute mystery. That's when I decided I was leaving, even if it meant walking backward to the meadow like an idiot. I kept backing up until the trees thinned and the light opened up again, and the antler ring came back into view. The meadow looked different now, not visually. The sun was lower, turning everything amber. But the feeling had changed, like the open space was a stage and I'd walked into the wrong part of the play. I went straight to the ring, staying outside it. and lifted my camera for another burst. I wanted proof. I wanted something concrete to pin this to later, so my mind couldn't sand it down into a dream. I took a sequence of shots. Rapid clicks. The ring in the center. The melted oval inside. The blood smears on bone. Then I looked down at the screen to review. One frame showed the ring exactly as I'd seen it. Antlers angled inward, tips like spikes. The next frame, taken a fraction of a second later, showed one antler rotated 90 degrees. Not slid, not dragged. Rotated in place, like a hand had turned it. The snow around it was undisturbed. No scuff, no scrape, no compression. Just a different orientation. I scrolled back and forth between the frames, like repetition would force an explanation. Nothing changed. The images stayed impossible. I looked up. The tree line was darker now. The tall movement wasn't obvious anymore, but the feeling of it was there. That sense of vertical attention, like something was standing just behind the trunks, lined up with them. The clacking started again. Softer this time. Farther away, like it was moving in an arc. Not closing in. Circling. I swallowed and forced my hands steady. I didn't shine a light. I didn't shout. I didn't do anything that would turn this into a confrontation. I backed away from the ring and aimed for the logging road berm, because it was a physical guide I could follow even if my sense of direction started lying. I kept my head down and my steps careful, and I walked out of that meadow like I was trying not to wake something. Dusk came fast. The sky went from gold to steel in a few minutes. The meadow behind me sank into shadow. The forest ahead became a pattern of black lines. I didn't use the headlamp right away. Light makes a target. Light also ruins night vision, and I needed every advantage I could get. The clacking stopped. And then the footfalls started. Slow, heavy. Not crashing through brush, but stepping with intent. They weren't right behind me. They were off to the side, wide, pacing the edge of the trees like something matching my exit route without stepping into the open. Every few steps, there'd be a faint scrape, like bone touching bark. I kept moving, steady, refusing to speed up. The berm under my boots gave me a line to hold, dirt and gravel with snow crust on the edges. I followed it like it was a railing in a dark stairwell. I tried my phone again, not even to call, just to see if I had service. Nothing. The screen flickered once, and then went black like the battery had died, even though it had been at 70% when I left the truck. I shoved it back in my pocket and kept moving. The footfalls shifted closer for a moment, then drifted out again, like it was testing how I'd react. I didn't give it anything. I reached the place where the spur widened. I could see the pale shape of my truck through the trees. And I swear, right before I stepped out of the shadow line, I heard one last quiet clack, close enough that I felt it in my teeth. Not a threat, more like punctuation. I got to the truck and yanked the door open. I climbed in, shut it hard, and locked it out of habit. I sat there for a second, breathing through my nose, forcing my hands to unclench. Then I put my palm on the steering wheel. Warm. Not sun warm. Not leftover warmth from earlier. Engine recently warm. I stared at the dash. The keys were in my pocket. The ignition was off. No lights were on. Nothing looked disturbed. I leaned forward and pressed my hand to the hood latch area from inside, feeling the heat through the metal like a living thing. I got out and touched the hood directly. It was warm, like the truck had been running within the last few minutes. My breath came out in thick white clouds, and the hood radiated that steady heat that should have been impossible. I walked around the truck with my flashlight low, scanning the snow for prints. There were my tracks. And there was a second set next to them. Same tread, a few inches to the left, all the way to the driver's side door. The second set stopped there, like it had arrived and decided it didn't need to go further. I didn't look toward the meadow. I didn't shine the light into the trees. I just got back in, started the engine, and drove. The whole way out, every reflective marker and snow patch felt like an eye blinking. I kept my speed controlled and my grip steady, because sliding off a logging road is how people end up as found objects in spring. When I finally hit the paved county road, my phone came back on like nothing had happened. Service bars popped up, and the Deer Call app was open again on my screen. Paused mid-call, waiting. I got home after dark. Lauren met me at the door before I could take my boots off.
You didn't answer.
No service. The pin never came through.
I know. I drove up the hill and got one bar, and your text finally came in. It came in stamped after you were already supposed to be back.
I didn't like hearing that. The text should have gone through the second I hit pavement. Instead, it showed up late, like it'd been sitting on purpose.
What happened?
I told her the facts first. The antler ring, the melted oval inside it, blood smeared on old bone, my camera refusing to focus on the center, the tape ending up on the wrong tree, the Deer Call app opening in my pocket and screaming at full volume. I left out the part about the prints matching mine until the end, because saying it out loud made it feel like I was making it up.
So something followed you.
Something imitated me.
That's worse.
I showed her the photos, the burst sequence, the rotated antler. She stared at the screen, then at me.
That's not a camera glitch.
No,
Are you going back?
absolutely not. I meant it when I said it too. Not because I'd been scared off. Because whatever that was, it wasn't a thing that wanted to be hunted. It wanted interaction. It wanted response. Emma padded into the room half asleep, hair wild, clutching her blanket. I picked her up and felt the weight of her, warm and real, and it grounded me like a nail. I didn't tell her anything. I just carried her back to bed and sat with her until her breathing leveled out. When I came back out, Lauren had the gear bin open.
This goes in the safe room tonight. Camera 2.
I didn't argue. The next morning, I called the number from the voicemail. It didn't ring. It went straight to a recorded message that the number wasn't in service. I tried searching local groups for the name I remembered from that old message exchange. Nothing obvious. No profile picture I recognized. No recent posts. It was like the guy had stepped out of the internet, the same way that thing had stepped in and out of the trees. I considered driving back in daylight with someone else. I thought about bringing flagging tape and stakes and laying out a full grid. Then I looked at the photos again. The center of the ring still looked flat in a way that didn't match the rest of the meadow. The camera metadata was normal. No corrupted file warnings. No weird exposure shifts. Just a normal image of an impossible arrangement. I kept coming back to the melted oval. Something warm had been there recently. Not hours recently. Recently enough that the snow hadn't refrozen. The cold that night had been clear and sharp. Any melt should have crusted over again. But in the photo, the edges were still wet. That meant the warmth wasn't just the sun. It was the kind of warmth that comes from a body. I boxed the whole thing up in my mind under one label: not safe, and I tried to move on. Weeks passed. Snow patches shrank. Mud took over. The world did that slow seasonal shrug where it pretends nothing strange ever happened. I didn't talk about it much, not because I was embarrassed or anything, but because talking about it felt like tapping antlers together, like a signal. Then one afternoon, I was digging through the gear bin in the mudroom for spare gloves, and my hand brushed something hard and curved. I pulled it out. A single shed antler tine. Not a whole antler, just the tine, snapped clean like it'd been broken with careful pressure instead of chewed. The surface was smooth, pale, and it smelled faintly like sap. Resin clung to the base, amber and sticky, the way it looks when something's been wedged into a living tree and pulled out later. I stood there holding it, feeling my skin go cold even though the house was warm. I'd washed those bins out after the trip. I'd dumped them, shaken them, checked for ticks and debris. I'm not casual about bringing the woods inside. That tine wasn't there before. Lauren saw my face and didn't ask what it was. She just came over, looked, and nodded like she'd expected a second shoe to drop.
Burn it.
I almost did, but I didn't. I put it in a sealed jar instead and labeled it with the date, because a part of me still wanted the world to be a place where evidence mattered. I set the jar on a shelf in the workshop, far from Emma's reach, far from anywhere I'd have to see it daily. That night I went out to lock the truck, and I caught myself touching the hood out of habit. Cold metal. Normal. Still, I stood there a long time, listening to the woods around the cabin, waiting for a soft clack that never came. And what bothered me most wasn't the idea of something out there. It was the idea that it had learned my stride, that it had practiced, that it had left me a piece of itself or a piece of the ring. Like a reminder. Not a threat exactly. A tag. A way of saying it knew where my things went when I thought I was home. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Like the video, subscribe for more, and share it if you know someone who'd be into this kind of content. There's another video waiting for you on screen now. I think you'll like that one too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.